Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm David, a bookseller at Literati Bookstore, and we are pleased to welcome Terry Blackhawk in support of her poetry collection, Maumee. After a reading, she'll be joined in conversation by Scott Boberg and a quick webinar overview for our attendees. The chat is closed, but you can keep that chat window open as I'll be dropping links to purchase the book from Literati throughout the event. The Q&A is accessible. Please submit questions if you have them. Live transcription is available on your toolbar as well. And if you're watching us later on YouTube, links to purchase the book are in the description. A reminder, you can also shop for more books at literatibookstore.com to have shipped to your home anywhere in the United States. And if you live in Southeast Michigan, our doors are open to the public for in-store shopping. Most of all, we'd like to thank you for your attendance this evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for being here. And now, allow me to introduce tonight's author and our moderator. Terry Blackhawk was born in California and grew up in Massachusetts, Georgia, and Indiana. After earning a BA in literature at Antioch College, she moved to Detroit, where her career as a high school creative writing teacher for Detroit Public Schools eventually led to her founding, in 1995, Inside Out Literary Arts Project, a nonprofit writers in schools program dedicated to amplifying the voices of Detroit youth. Blackhawk holds a PhD in Reading and Language Arts Education from Oakland University, which granted her an honorary doctorate in 2013. Twice named Michigan Creative Writing Teacher of the Year, she has frequently shared her passion for ekphrastic poetry and for Emily Dickinson through poems, essays, workshops, and presentations. Terry's poetry collections include Body and Field, Escape Artist, The Light in Between, and One Less River was named a top 2019 indie poetry title by Kirkus Reviews. Upon her retirement from Inside Out in 2015, Wayne State University Press brought out To Light a Fire, 20 Years with the Inside Out Literary Arts Project, a collection of essays co-edited with Inside Out senior writer Peter Marcus. After 50 years as a Detroiter, Terry moved to Connecticut to live near her son, Yale professor Ned Blackhawk, and her grandchildren. And Scott Boberg joined the Ann Arbor Film Festival as its deputy director in August 2022. Boberg has been an administrator, curator, and educator in nonprofit arts organizations, including the Santa Monica Museum of Art, the University of Wyoming Art Museum, and the Detroit Institute of Arts. With a focus on contemporary film, music, and visual art, Boberg developed exhibitions and public program series at the Contemporary Arts Center Cincinnati, the Aspen Art Museum, and the Toledo Museum of Art. Born in Hollywood, Boberg studied film and poetry at the University of California, Berkeley, studying with poets such as Tom Gunn and Gary Soto. As a visual artist, he's had solo exhibitions at New Mastodon Books, the Wyoming Arts Council Gallery, and Semantics Gallery. His painted book, Famous Spies, is in the special collections of the Getty Research Institute and numerous private collections. In 2004, he curated the exhibition Sport, Science, and Nameless Delight, Nabokov's Wyoming Butterflies at the University of Wyoming Art Museum, which included family photographs shared by Dmitry Nabokov, as well as original drawings, notebooks, and poetry from the Berg collection at the New York Public Library. Thank you for being with us, and enjoy.
Well, thank you so much, David. And thank you, Scott. It's really, really always a pleasure to be with you virtually, in person, on the road, looking for birds. Whatever we manage to do is always a delight. And I'm just really thrilled that I thank Literati for inviting me to share my new chapbook. And I also thank Jill Peak and Colin from Alice Green Books in Ann Arbor that really produced this lovely, lovely book, which has a lovely cover, which is by my late beloved, the Toledo artist Neil Frankenhauser. So this book comes as just sort of to me, a one long poem in a way, grieving and celebrating Neil, whom I was fortunate to get to be a loving friend with for many years. They also were able to find images from his art on the inside pages. So the book has that dimension for Neil in here also. And of course, it's just stunning cover. He was a 110% devoted artist all his life. And I'm just very grateful that I have the opportunity to share these poems with you. So I'm going to start with the first poem that I wrote in this collection, and the painting that inspired it is actually over my shoulder. Neil and I, when we were dating, I was living in Detroit in Lafayette Park townhouses, and one day he got just sort of, I think, kind of frustrated with a piece of art I had in my bedroom, and he just sort of pranced in and replaced it with this. So I've loved it and lived with it, enjoyed it ever since. The poem is titled "Of Course," and I wrote this actually the night that he was almost dying, the night that I wrote this in Ohio. I unfortunately was not near when he passed away. Of course, you are not here, but you left me these tilted telephone poles from the 1920s, a car I can almost see, and a triangular warning sign in bright red contrast to the deep ochre and cobalt shadows crossing the center line of the road. It could be the way your dusky trees in the background swell against the horizon, amorphous there beyond the vanishing point, which is, of course, where you are now, or almost, on the verge of taking your last breath. But this road you gave me led me into sleep so often, I'll go down it now, keeping track, and of course, also not. This garage on the right, I could pull into it on an ordinary day, find perhaps a path alongside and a bungalow a few paces ahead, its porch half hidden by bushes. I'll meet you there. There must have been some ocean in the air the day you painted this. Maybe that's why the trees rise and fall like waves, and the sidewalk's edges seem so liquid, almost ebb and flow. It was always a wonderful challenge to go to a museum with Neil. This poem is called At the National Gallery of Art, Memorial View. To reach the Rothkos, climb 4 flights up, past the Calder floating in light from windows angled above the terrazzo staircase, marble bright, marble light, trilobites and shells embedded underfoot, and on I go, my river's shores opening out. I've passed the bellows you loved, Huey Lee Smith's ghetto flute ascending. First stop, Magritte, a curtained emptiness. Next, Max Ernst's moment of calm belies its name with the textural busyness you'd have defied these new motion sensors to peer into. I imagine you imbibing this forest of drowned roller coasters, sgraffito birds, bristle-toned pines, collapsible cups uncollapsing upward. You always did like to come nose close. In my wallet, a profile cut out, you, hands thrust in your painting smock, face tilting up, lips puckered for a kiss. The photo, just one of many surprises you tuck into a pocket or sock drawer before driving back to Toledo. You may never find this, you wrote on one, but I hope it brings you joy if you do. So when I arrive at the Rothkos and start writing and a stranger interrupts to tell me I'm his muse, I startle. He is so not you, yet I go on into the not you, blab about Twombly, art pilgrimages, but why talk to him at all? I sought a chapel, not this. The black square floats inside the maroon, the red above the white. None, all of it is still. This is a 2-part poem called Diptych. And I think of Neil as, he loved Northwest Ohio so much. And I think the landscape just sort of seeps into his paintings. This is called Drawing You In. And also at the end of his life, he was just taking little edges of watercolors and doodling in them and finding things, all kinds of surprises in them. And it was funny. He was just having so much fun. discovering creatures in these otherwise disposable paintings. Diptych 1, drawing you in. A leaf blinks and voila, eyelashes, fins, and scales take shape. Call it a banana stuck in a stanza or a moray stuck in an eel. I see them in all your river studies now, lumbering quadrupeds, dozy reptiles lying in wait for your doodling on watercolors you were almost ready to throw away. You trusted the toothy paper to snag whatever insisted on being itself, offbeat fauna emerging from the water, so hard to paint, yet you did it so well. Water that was the paint, that was the river, that was the paper in front of you as you sat beside it. Your Maumee, sacred, you called it. Mornings, afternoons, hours spent looking south and east to where the river widened, then turned toward Lake Erie and then to the sea. Not to the west with its overpass, traffic, Mad Anthony's battlefield, you painted those too, or the riverside camp where the Odawa sheltered runaways from slavery. The great black swamp, century-old drainage seeping up now through the wild watershed of history with you lost in it. And across the road, the cemetery. Oh, I know no easy equivalence between outside and in. The wheel turns, creatures subside into the leaves and waves they came from. But if your calling it sacred makes it so, maybe I'll plant myself there, not far from the water, among the modest stones. Though before I do, grant me just one grain of the sustenance that kept you there, drawing you in, drawing you out. I'll skip over to some shorter ones. Sun hat, Cape Cod photo number 1. Here you are squinting out from the straw hat we bought at the Stop and Save. And here I am, uncut, hair shaggier than my dog's, its fringe a hinge of memory. And what's a photo but a mirror, one where I see you still seeing me, and meet again in your gaze the woman I was the night we met, strangers just in from the rain. We were big Dylan fans. And so this one is called Dylan Again. It was Bob Dylan in concert at the Toledo Zoo that summer evening, his voice almost beyond repair, as the sun set and the crowd sat or stood, not quite filling the amphitheater. Bob was wearing a yellow suit with an array of Sergeant Pepper buttons, a bellman's uniform, you called it. You preferred Leon Russell with his long white hair and beard like a prophet come down from the hills, and I agreed. Then you yelled at the people who stood and blocked our view, shaking your fist in righteous rage. I stayed still, my usual MO, swallowing embarrassment. Can't you think of it as just so much gas, Dr. Brody said, of your crankiness, hot air, fingers waving in front of her mouth, that has to find its way out? Just let it go. And so I did. Darkness fell, I took your arm, and there was Bob, stepping up to give us shelter from the storm. I can't see the chat, but I think some of my fellow poetry pilgrims, my poetry pilgrim posse, a group of us that have met with Marie Howe and over the years are here. And Marie, in one of our workshops, this was part of a longer piece I tried out, and she heard me read it and she said, "Stop, there's your poem." So thanks to Marie. Early Elegy. Of course, I know it's time to come to terms. You are ash, memory, the grit and grain we scattered from your painting spot onto the surface of your beloved river, not far from that small historic house we came close to buying. Where I live now, I sit and look out from a 3-season porch, much like the one you admired in Maumee. You saw yourself making art there, grateful for the northern light from the uncurtained windows, and sometimes I see you here, busy or laughing, doing crosswords, or finding new angles to sketch among the rooftops and flower pots, making ordinary days as ordinary people who love one another are wont to do, speculating about the breeze or the sky. This one is called A Long Wait Road, which is here in Connecticut. The title is also the first line. A long wait road, as the sunset deepened and blazed, I stopped to listen into the dark stand of barren trees by the frozen stream behind me, and heard, as if from another kingdom, an owl's soft, pulsing calls. Despite cars rushing past, I heard it again, the song on the verge of something I could not name, but seemed to remember. How could the sky be this fierce, the woods so still, and you not here beside me? This one is called How You Left. I saw the hairy woodpecker with its oddly yellow crown, a bullfrog on the far side of lily pads gleaming in the sun, its throat a small balloon, and there were children beside us, peering into the woodland scene. You gave each bird its one assignment, this one scratching, that one pecking, and then just like that, they were gone. Not as if a door opened or a human had walked out into the feeder area. Rather, it was circular. Some vortex had sucked them up. I thought waterspout, whirlwind. It got still. Then the hawk cried, stretched wide its wings, and landed. So here, and this has an epigraph, you, by being dead, are more alive to me than ever, Alan Shapiro. And I want to say I was so struck with the epigraph for the entire book I found at an exhibit of Laurie Anderson's at the Hirshhorn in DC, grieving her loss, tremendous love, the musician. The purpose of death is the release of love. So here I've gone and reframed your painting, the one of the street with its tilted telephone poles, the street that led me into sleep so often, now bordered by an eggplant purple, very trendy, and advised by the decorator to pick up the purples and greens of other pieces in my room. But it limits it now, limits you as if you are truly framed, captured, gone with and within this frame. I should have chosen a lighter color, a chalky off-white, something to move the eye outward, not this dark lock. I still get lost in that street the way I got lost in the exhibit of Plains Indian ledger art yesterday, brought up short by the bounding buffalo and Sundance memories painted by Bear's heart, shorn of his hair, imprisoned in a fort in Florida. And then the blue-clad troops marching his Cheyenne into a stockade, the warriors standing stiff, two-dimensional against the gridded paper, heading into an unthinkable dark. Oh, everywhere is doom and beauty, ache and ruin. So it almost wasn't strange the way your friend came up to me, surprised me in the act of looking, and brought you, as always, with him, your van, a lifetime of friendship and art, and you there within it. Your paintings live with me. Bring me your voice, your antic laugh, your wry, sly glances up from the surfaces of them. There you are, working at your easel in the corner of your studio, its tilted frame in your lap. And there I am in a chair across the room, lifting my skirt. I'm cutting that poem a little short. Let's see. How are we doing for time? Just a few more. This one is called Telling Time. And it also has an epigraph I was happy to discover. Time rattles at our window, time trying to get in. You told time by the sun when you worked en plein air. You were your own challenger then, Neil, adhering to your set-up rituals, the unzippering of the case of oil pastels, the unfolding of the easel, the tying it to a filled gallon jug lest wind pick up by the side of the road, or else by the bridge over the Maumee, there in Sidecut Park, off the main highway. After balancing the board on your lap, you'd stake out hours on the bench, on the bank, to let the current or the leaves or your divine selfishness lead you, the sharpening light of evening, always best. I could climb that, the young woman announced after she pulled off the road to take in the smokestack of the abandoned Acme steam plant, rising magenta and orange from your canvas. So now I know no place is too incongruous for love or sex, how the relentless rust of this region, its nuclear plant slag heaps, piles of salt dotting the industrial corridor between our towns, could be worthy of love. It was all you ever wanted, you told me, in the mauve twilight of the nursing home, where I rushed every blessed chance I could. And when draw was all you could say, you took the marker from me and moved it in permanent black lines across the white board, and what started as a star became a compass, a clock, something to parse a lifetime with, a mechanical flower that would collapse and devour you at last, alone and afraid, and me not there beside you. I know. This one is called A Blessing of Scallops, Eastern Market, Detroit. And this has an epigraph that a lot of people I see have been using. It's called Sit, Feast on Your Life by Derek Wolcott. A Blessing of Scallops, Eastern Market, Detroit. Succulent pillows of salt and sea, flesh dollops scooped from glistening shells, lined across the seafood company's bed of ice. Can they tell me how waves know when to stop cresting? If I walk alone through a midnight graveyard, will my bones remain the same? Maybe Brother Nature with his purslane, arugula, and nasturtiums can explain why the fox trotted through my yard in the middle of yesterday, or why the pie guy in the next stall never seems to see me, even when I buy his apples or admire his gooseberry pies. Cheese shop, wine shop, backpack I stuff my groceries in before crossing Gratiot and making my way through the park and home to my love, or would, except now I've moved far away and the market is locked down, while across the planet, Venice has canceled its yearly wedding with the sea. No rings to toss to the wave now, so why do I hear your voice in my dreams? And why did you call me in the middle of the night, months after you had died? Dead, he is dead, I told the 2 a.m. voice on the line, even though I had just seen you sitting at my table, watching me whisk a sauce for our scallops, pen in your pocket protector, your shirt sleeves rolled loosely above your finely boned wrists. Neil was never without his pocket protector. A couple more. These are the last two in the book. The first sentence is also the title. I know it's bad form to write about dreams, but reader, I trust I won't lose you when I say my love came to me last night and we set out for the river. I climbed onto my bike, unridden since the spill that smashed my ankle years before. He'd been crippled, but moved along smoothly, the lower half of his right leg replaced by a bionic rod. He sped ahead and soon was gone, but I wobbled on and found him, sashaying through traffic at a busy intersection. It got quiet and we headed back to his cluttered house. What he said to me then disappeared with the dream, but as we peered from his door down through the piled up years of his art, I'm sure he heard me promise. I'll come in and stay with you, I told him. I wrote that thanks to Peter Marcus. I don't know if he's here tonight, but he's been a longtime friend and has a beautiful book about the river that's just out from Wayne State this past year when our fathers returned to us as birds. And this is called Sonny Rollins and the Redemptive Handrail. It's the last poem in the book. And it has an epigraph from Wisława Szymborska. I keep on not knowing, and I cling to that like a redemptive handrail. And there are also a couple of italicized quotes in here from Ovid's Metamorphoses and from Abraham Lincoln, a letter of consolation. So you'll just have to listen for them. I'm not going to do air quotes like that, but you'll probably be able to tell which is which. Sonny Rollins and the Redemptive Handrail. Take it, one note at a time, your breath the only constant, except for there where sparrows drop below the line of the roof, or where the rime-crusted grass you crunched over creates a little whine up your spine. Oh, I want to be able to bear this. I've tried to let it push out endlessly the way a gong once sounded sends ripples into the universe that never stop. Meanwhile, one breath, then another, mute, then open, mull, then recall, paths, canvases, landscapes turned inside out, sun-bleached branches whitened against a black sky, slow, pulsing, slow, darling, I loved you once, the sax's moan reminds how down the sloping lawn or across the icy walk we held each other, grief's hushed joy now of a purer, holier sort, this sad, sweet feeling in the heart. Still waiting love's amber arpeggios, I hear one chord's tingle replace the next, then back, liquid tremolo, rampant here, vibrating nowhere's edge. And I keep on not knowing, cannot say hand, dog, boot, or glove, outside or beyond, only wonder if the moment cannot contain more sun than this. So, a few poems from my little chapbook. Thanks, everybody.
This is such a remarkable little book. It's so powerful. And if you haven't bought it, the one thing I encourage you to read it because of the poems, but there's something so beautifully tactile about this volume. It's sort of its bend and the surface of it, and then the artwork that is part and parcel of the whole book. So I'm glad that you talked a little bit about working with Alice Green and company in producing that. And
They do beautiful work, yeah.
Yeah, it's really beautiful volume. And it's always such a great pleasure hearing you read and to revisit poems that I've had a chance to read before, and these little sparkling moments of things that I hadn't noticed before. A lot of this book takes place outside. A lot of your poetry takes place outside. And, when I've had the great joy of going birding with you, what I discovered early on is that going out to look at birds is as much about poetry as it is about the birds, because a little moment or a little thing in that you observe reminds you of some language or a phrase that circles back. And so my memories of going birding with you were as much of the poetry we talked about as
Oh,
as it is about the birds. So it's this interlocked kind of connectivity. And I'm glad that it isn't really bird watching. It's so much of it, particularly for you, I think, is bird listening. And even in the poems that you wrote today, it was about the listening that occurs and the sound and the sound that birds make, but all those listings for things beyond what we can perhaps physically ascertain. So all of that is mixed into this kind of question I have, and this beautiful phrase you introduced me to of birdwhile. The birdwhile meaning that moment at which a bird presents itself, and you have that time with it. What I find so fascinating about this book was your observations of Neil painting.
mhm.
It's so powerful and it's so visceral, down to the apparatus of the water jug that holds the easel in place, and then the textures of the pastels and so on. Can you talk a little bit about how that observation of him painting in plein air by the banks of the Maumee River, how that art while maybe worked for him, or this kind of notion of observing that that connection that he had. I'm fascinated by that. So
He was very, very in tune with his river. It was his river. He called it his sacred river, and he went out every day that he could. I mean, that was his, no matter what was going on in his life, if he could get out and the weather was okay, he would spend hours out there, and he'd meet people and chat or not, or he'd observe and come back talking about the birds he'd seen, or a flock of deer that walked across the island, or one day he saw the season change. He talked about how he had been there on a warm day in early spring, and the leaves all came out. So these are kind of his stories, are kind of mingled in. And I used to go love sitting out there with him while he was working, and I would poke around, like bird watch across the road in the cemetery, or just sort of absorb the ambiance of that. In fact, could I read the title poem, because that springs from that. Maumee, Maumee.
I don't think you did.
I didn't.
And
So
I love it. So please.
Okay, yeah, because that really gets at that it's sort of global. It's like the whole surround sound and visual and auditory. It's just immersion in being in the moment and the place and the water. I mean, there's something just so resuscitative about rivers. And that's one of the things I enjoyed so much after I moved downtown Detroit. It kind of revived me after a pretty rough divorce to live not too far from the Detroit River. So that river and then Neil's Maumee are just kind of a continuum, I guess. But this is the title poem. And this is a haiku, because it has like a long chunk of prose poem, and then there's a little haiku at the end. So, Maumee, Maumee. Fish leap and splash, grasses' heads toss in the wind, the boat over weighted down willows swish and sigh, and the river itself, moment by moment, now rippled, now smooth, with its swoop of swallows, traffic from the bridge, an endless roar of sea. Maumee, Maumee, I sing it. Oriole hopping from branch to branch, small leaf cutter on the edge of my page. Fingers stained with the green of an oil pastel, house finch weaving its song sparrow cranking up In the understory, I sing the warble rush flow, gritting of teeth, orange truck rushing past the nothing that is here except these gnats dancing in front of my eyes. I am long gone water from the bottle, orgasmic fizz, tornado at night passing us by. I wade the water, but do not go in. So yes, Payne's grays, a kind of bluish black, excellent for painting stormy skies. And yes, sun sparkle, flashes of dilatory bobble, a fish flips up from the surface. Smooth the paint on the panels, sweetie, dive, won't you? And don't argue. My tone is your tone, your town, your tongue. Kayaks floating past, and Sunday afternoons by our own Grand Château, pigeons that fly up, the necessary dark. No notes, just the way that warbler bounced and climbed each available twig. So there we go. I hope that sings a little bit or gives you another.
What a beautiful poet's way of answering a question.
Thank you.
But it does really sum up that kind of multi-sensory experience that you convey so beautifully in your work, and which you're so attentive to when, I'm so fortunate to spend time with you birding or walking through Eastern Market. It's all this kind of bits of information and references. I first met you when I worked at the Detroit Institute of Arts.
Yeah.
And this poem in this book that you wrote about being in the National Gallery. Talk a little bit about how museums function for you as a poet. And obviously it functioned for Neil as a visual artist, but I'd like to know a little, because you devoted so much of your career to ekphrastic writing about visual art. Tell me a little bit about that experience of how a museum functions for you as a poet.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I love going to museums, of course, and I have had a pretty nice long relationship with the DIA, Detroit Institute of Arts, where I was leading workshops for teachers. Sometimes I had teachers coming from across the country doing workshops there, and I taught some graduate level classes at Oakland University during the summer, where we actually had the museum, where we met in the museum and could go out. And so the discussion around the art of discovering it with people who are writing and discovering it with me is just one of the richest episodes of my life. Really, I really loved it. And so I think there's something sort of very mysterious that happens between the artist and the viewer. You're sort of cast in a place that is and is not. It's an otherly kind of otherworldly place when you're under the spell of some art. So the kind of writing that comes out from it is often full of surprise and discovery. And of course, I have favorite pieces. I've led workshops in front of the Rivera murals many times. I love Charles McGee's Genesis Noah's Ark at the DIA. I mean, there's so many treasures that have sort of resonated with me, but then adding another layer of that, which is going to the art with Neil, was always extremely fascinating and fun, and seeing it through the artist's eyes was great. So yeah, that was kind of a catalog, that museum, the National Museum poem.
Yeah, it's a really there we go. I lost the video there. It's a really powerful experience to read about you spending time with an artist, a visual artist, in that context. The river is so important to your work. I think that in the time that we have, I think about 5 minutes left to talk about. I just wanted, because there's this other book of yours, One Less River. There's
Yes.
another river there.
Rivers
And,
ahead.
and again, also a beautiful image on the cover. Do you want to talk a little bit, or is there anything? Do you have it at hand? Is there a poem you would want to read? I think a lot about the title poem, and that sense of loss and memory and time, and the river is such an ancient symbol that is ever new, right? But yeah, is there anything that strikes you?
I could read the title poem from that for sure. Yeah, and also I'd like to say how much of Belle Isle is woven into this book, because it became such a source of replenishment for me, and I really miss it. I take my walks around here in Connecticut. I'm like, where's the island? Where's the bell tower and the lighthouse? But this is also Neil's art, by the way. It's called Storm Over the River, which is kind of perfect for this book. So One Less River, the title poem is for Blair, who was a wonderful poet and very beloved cultural leader for us in Detroit, died much, much too soon. I had him working with us on the Emily Dickinson project, and thankfully we have one of his performances and the Rivera Court. It's called Emily Dickinson's Farewell, and if you Google it, you can see him in full glory, and he set Emily Dickinson to music, and so he was just a multi-talented, loving person. So One Less River for Blair, 1967 to 2011. Okay, so you try anything, and you were always ready to go to South Africa, Siberia, New York, barely 2 cents in your pocket, a guitar for the subway, a laugh to get you through the night. And you ride anything. You disdained cowboys, but when the cowboy says how he can't resist that unexplainable feeling that makes me go get on bulls, it's like everything just stops. The world has stopped spinning at that point in time. It's you I hear, dancing, riding the line, eternal stoppage, perpetual spin. Last night the moon was a coin, a relief of wings, a scarab, beaten gold, rounded or rendered to place on your eyelids forever now. Today a darker fuzz belies the sun. How dreary myth becomes. Forget this channel of regret, gospel coinage, tedious juke joints, tankers heading south. Dear ventriloquist, don't move your lips. Listen to the hermits, antennae clicking, claws barely touching the sand. Perpetual stoppage, eternal spin. Put those shells in your pocket. Make it one less river to cross a second time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a beautiful poem. Thank you for sharing that as well. Yeah, Belle Isle, there's in this same book, and I encourage people to get a copy, when you rescued a woodcock.
Okay.
And it's such a beautiful poem, and I just love in it how you pick up this bird with this enormous beak and these huge eyes, but it's so light and airy, and you've just rescued it from a cat, and it takes off, and that's such a beautiful thing. How often do we are able to handle a bird in a moment like that? So that's another poem that stands out for me in this. And having spent time with you amongst the woods and nature, I could totally see you rescuing a woodcock.
It had to happen.
So that's an amazing thing. I think we're at time for Q&A. If anyone has some questions that they would like to ask, but
I
do.
Pleasure. Yeah, I do have one question. I also have some comments about thanking you, Terry, for such a wonderful reading and conversation. People are really enjoying it.
Great.
And people are welcome to submit more questions. We can answer them as time allows. My first question is from a viewer who says, your imagery and descriptions are so beautifully poignant. You can sense the poet drawing life from the artist's work, turning grief into visually poetic art. How do you think Neil would respond to this collection?
I think he would be very, very grateful. Yeah. I just wish I could have shared some of it with him. The big regret that it came, in memoriam, rather than when we were together. But I think he would have liked it a lot. And I think he would have very much liked the way the artwork was put together in the cover and inside the book.
Great. That's all the questions I have for now, unless anyone else out there in cyberspace has questions. Terry and Scott, you are welcome to continue your conversation.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. We'll do that, and please cut in if there's additional questions that people ask.
One thing I wanted to mention before I forget about it is that my friend Sean Nethercott, who was the founding director of Matrix Theater and is now engaged in some very interesting projects, one of which is sort of trying to define what it means to live in the Great Lakes as a sort of a citizen of this landscape. And she's recorded a couple of the poems that I read, the diptych, and I think the telling time, for something called, I'm going to miss, the Great Lakes Radio Odyssey Hour, or the Great Lakes Odyssey Radio Hour. But the effort is to sort of define how do we call ourselves, because we're not Southerners, we're not Midwesterners. What is the essence of being in that wonderful watershed around the lakes? It's a very, very special place on this planet. So I'm very grateful to Sean, and she's always doing something really important.
So we do have another question. Terry, a viewer wants to know if you will be doing any live readings in Michigan, specifically the Detroit area.
Yes, I have 3 coming up in April, and I hope to schedule some more. Actually, Neil left a lot of artwork behind in that poem, The Dream of Being in His Cluttered House. And his daughter Heidi is creating these sort of pop-up events where people can take the art to a good home, very little expense. And so the Hannon House, which is Hannon Center in Detroit, on April 15th, I'm starting to put together a program there, which I hope will have Neil's paintings available, and then I can read. Joy Gaines Friedler is going to read, and I'm hoping other poets will join in. We don't have that firmed up yet, but that's an easy date to remember, April 15th. And then I'll be reading in Lansing, I think on the 16th or the 14th, for the Lansing Poetry Club. I think it's the 16th. And then on the 21st at Book Suite, is that it, in Ann Arbor, the bookstore, with Ellen Stone, wonderful sister poet, and Gloria Nixon John. So those are 3 that I will be in Michigan the latter part of April. So thank you for asking.
I think, was there some additional comments that came through, or?
More comments thanking you, Terry, for reading your poems about Neil and the one about Blair. People are really, it's resonating with the people that are in the audience.
That's great to know. Thank you.
I just want to do a shout out too. Terry and I were talking a little bit about those who wanted to see more of Neil's work. And if you want to look for WordPress, it's neilfrankenhauser.wordpress.com. And that will get you to a beautiful array of images, you know, and they just, the flow of the river and the flow of the painting, you know, I wrote down, and I've read the poem quite a few times, but the phrase, there must be some ocean in the air. Such a beautiful phrase. Can you talk a little bit about water? I mean, you always have this wonderful way of talking about water, and whether it's water in the atmosphere or rain or flowing water or ice water. I mean, it's there for you.
Well, that, you know, that this painting again is called it's called Sanger, California. He painted that in California. So that's why I was thinking the ocean was sort of permeating even the air that he breathed and he was painting from. But yeah, I don't know. It's always been inspiring to me. I have that poem I love from being out on Belle Isle at the end of March when the ice was breaking up. And I mean, there's magic. Who is it wrote? I think it's Lauren Isley. If there's magic on this planet, it's found in water.
That's a beautiful phrase.
Yeah. I've held that onto that for many, many years. So just to be out on the island with the river going past, and that day when the ice was breaking up, and I never heard anything like that before. And so I wrote the poem Ice Music to go with that. And then also we were in the Protea program together, and that I created a kind of a semi-mythical female persona. And those the Protea poems are in One Less River.
Right.
We had a wonderful experience of being able, because I had a Kresge Fellowship, a grant from the Kresge Foundation, Kresge Arts in Detroit, to do this tableau, and I was able to get musicians, including your beautiful wife Lisa Rascatori, was one of the musicians, and a filmmaker. And if you go to the webpage for One Less River, there are a couple of links to CDs where the music from Protea has been recorded by those lovely people in Central Michigan. So yeah, I'm just I don't know.
It all comes back to listening and watching and looking and absorbing, and yeah, it's always a pleasure talking with you, Terry. It's such a great experience, I have to say.
Absolutely, Scott. This has been so much fun. Can I close out with a poem that we have very much in common? Do I have time?
Yeah,
I think do have time. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right, guys. I hope you're ready for this. This is called A Wedding on the Island with Thanks to Hafiz.
I'm embarrassed now, but please, it's a beautiful poem.
That's why I would save it for the end. This is for Scott and Lisa, Belle Isle, Detroit, August 26, 2017. Not the stars themselves, but the spaces between them. Not the blades of the paddle, but their dip and rise and pull through the water. Think balance and paradox, quixotic chime, the way lovers finding recognize each other, for only a perfect one who is always laughing at the word two can make you know of love. Here, light becomes tangible, hovering over and through our late summer grasses. Milkweed, chicory, goldenrod release their fragrances. Brisk triangular sails move back and forth on the horizon. Tankers glide slowly downstream. The glass domes glint and gleam. What is a vow but a hope and a prediction? A ring for memory, a song for luck. Let the myriad creatures grab their instruments and join the song. Scott and Lisa, 7 years is a good number. I'm going to choke up now. You've had mountains and music, and practice to build on. Through you, we see life start clapping. Learn how, whenever love makes itself known against another body, the jewel in the eye starts to dance.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm a little biased, but it's a beautiful poem, Terry.
Borrowing generously from Hafiz, I might say.
But they're on the river, and the river is so much a part of it, whether it's the Detroit River or the Maumee, it's all connected, right? So
Thank you.
yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Terry and Scott, for joining us on At Home at Literati. And thanks to our viewers as well. Make sure you buy the book, Maumee, Maumee. The link is in the chat and on the event listing that brought you here. And of course, you can also come into our store where we have many more recommendations for you. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you at the next event.
Thank you, David. Thank
Yeah.
you, Scott. Good night.
Bye. Thank you, David. Terry. Always amazing. Thank you.
Till next time. For sure. Bye-bye.